Hey, so Andy, thanks very much for coming in.
No
Andy's from Roland. He is the high-tech products, European product specialist. Is that right?
European high-tech product specialist.
Excellent. And exciting news, we've got a brand new Roland instrument, which is the SH-4D.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, this is the Roland SH-4D, which is a compact desktop synthesizer, and it packs a huge amount of synthesizer sound design potential into quite a small box, really. We've sort of designed it for musicians who, you know, obviously they're perhaps working in environments where they don't have a lot of space, but crucially, they want to get really hands-on with their sound design. You know, they want to grab controls, feel it making a meaningful difference to the sounds that they're working on. And so even though it is in a small package, you know, we have, you know, 2 full ADSR sections, LFOs, controls for our oscillators, big knob for the filter so you can grab everything. And although it doesn't have its own keyboard, you do have at the bottom here a little keyboard button section, but as I was just playing in the intro jam there, you can also play it from an external.
Yeah, you were playing the keyboard and the keyboard, so you were playing it. So that means obviously it's multi-timbral. How many parts are we talking about?
So it's a 4-part synthesizer plus a rhythm part, so 5-part multi-timbral in total.
Right, okay.
And so you can have different, as we'll sort of look in a bit, you can have different synth sounds working on each individual part, plus a different drum part, and sequence those in patterns as well, which is really
So
cool.
what's under the hood? Is it Zencore? Is it ACB? What's the kind of...
So it's kind of its own thing, really. So it's built upon the Zencore technology as its sort of fundamental base, but it isn't a Zencore product. So it's taken that technology and it's been optimized for this form factor specifically. Right. So optimization of the technology allows us to have sort of multiple different oscillator models. So you can get retro sounds, sort of vintage analog style things. You can have more modern digital sort of sounds, plus some quite futuristic tones as well.
Right.
So
and what's the polyphony count on it? Because that's going to be...
60 voices.
60 voices, and that includes the drum. And I know because the Roland are really good with their USB stuff, so can you get access to the individual... Because I know we've got a stereo out.
Yes.
But over USB, can we then access those?
If you're recording into your computer, you can either have a stereo mix over USB, having all the parts, you know, just capturing your performance, or if you want, you can have individual outs for parts 1, 2, 3, 4, and the rhythm as well. And they respond on separate MIDI channels.
So 10 output channels, 12, I suppose, if you've got the mix as well. Right,
yeah.
That's always handy, because I know some of the boutiques work really, and that's a really kind of bonus feature.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the sound engine. What's generating the actual kind of core sounds here?
Yeah, so the SH-4D, so we have, the crucial thing really is that we have multiple different oscillator models, which I'll explain about in a second. So we have our oscillator section, and then we go through a new filter design for us. So this is not based on any of our legacy products or anything like that, or a recreation of anything. So it's the new SH-4D filter, and it has its own amp and LFO section. But the oscillator model section, what this allows us to do is change really the fundamental oscillator tone.
So the sort of sound engine.
Yeah,
right, okay.
And we have 11 different oscillator models that we can go through, and then you can choose which one you want, and then they go through the same filter and amp.
And so how many oscillators for each part? Is that...
It varies on the model. So if we're on the SH-4D model, which is the starting one here, you can have 4 individual oscillators. So I can select which one I want to use under here, adjust the levels of them. And if I say select the one, I can bring through all of my different waveforms. And you've got a huge choice of sort of analog style waveforms on here.
Right.
So this is a saw and a square. And I can individually tune. And the timbre dial is automatically hooked to sort of PWM.
Right.
But actually, you can apply that for each of the individual waveforms. So if I wanted to apply that to actually the some sort of wave modulation to a saw waveform, you can have that as well. So you get quite an interesting selection of tones.
So I mean that's quite that's a sort of usual paradigm that we can understand with flipping sort of oscillator models. Does each oscillator represent a voice in that 60, or is it each oscillator group, each part represents a voice?
I think it's each individual oscillator will take a voice. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But it's sort of the way that the polyphony's allocated is sort of, it depends on the
dynamic,
usage load.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All
So,
right, got you. Okay.
But yeah, there's plenty of polyphony for running 4 parts on the rhythm at the same time, which is very, very cool.
And presumably we've got effects per part, master effects.
Yeah, so you have over 90 sort of high quality DSP effects built into it. You can have one multi-effect per part. So you could have 4 individual tones and have one multi-effect on each, say chorus or distortion or whatever.
Right.
But then we also have a master effect section where you have reverb, chorus, and delay, which can be send effects. Plus, you can also have one multi-effect over the whole pattern.
All right, so decent. I guess those can be recorded when if you're going out.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
yeah, as part of the performance. Yeah. So.
I did notice when I was looking that it's possible also to have a USB return and send that into the effects engine as well. So
yes.
you get additional.
Yes. Yeah. I don't believe it goes through the filter section, but through
it
the
goes
effects
through the
and
effects
stuff.
engine.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about connectivity?
Yeah. So on the back, running from left to right, we have our USB-C connection, which is actually power. So you can run the SH-4D on batteries if you want, or power it from USB-C. And we have our MIDI in and out, which sends and receives MIDI over the 5 parts. We have an external clock in, an external audio input, left and right stereo jack outputs, and also a headphone connection.
Nice to see full-size MIDI connectors.
Yes.
How many models? You said there were 11.
So 11,
models.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
Okay.
So as I say, in the SH-4D, we can have 4 oscillators running at the same time and sort of mix them between them, going through the same filter. If I tweak the model dial here, the next one is the SH-3D. So this is the same fundamentally, but you lose one of the oscillators, but you gain a second LFO.
Right, okay.
So if you can work with 3 oscillators, that gives you a bit more.
A mere 3.
A mere 3
Right.
gives you a lot more modulation options. The third one, this is a sync oscillator. So if you can choose between 9 different oscillators to begin with, and you can sort of change the distance between them. So depending on which oscillator model you're in, the sliders and controls will reconfigure to optimize for that.
Makes sense, yeah.
So, but in each one, there's a huge number of sort of preset sounds. So in our sync one, although you can get things like traditional sync sound, there are other kind of interesting, different kind of effects and stuff.
Oh, that sounds like sample and hold. Interesting.
So plenty of scope for different sounds on here. The next 2 that we have actually are...
Oh, right, nice. You've got SH-101.
Yeah, SH-101 and Juno 106. So just to be clear on these are not full recreations of the SH-101 or the Juno 106. As I mentioned before, the oscillator model, it all goes through the SH-4D synth and amplifier. So what really the SH-101 and the Juno model give you are just the oscillator section
models,
and mimicking that workflow of adjusting your waveforms in real time. So it's really good if you're working on a track and you think, I'd really love just like something that's got a bit of a Juno flavour sound to it. Absolutely, you can get those out.
And I guess with a 101, we can get some sort of
acid. Yeah, exactly. We have for our SH-101. So
and of course that can be poly as well.
Yeah, polyphonic as well. So actually, if you want sort of more kind of like synth pads, we have all of those.
It lights up on the keyboards. That's quite handy.
Yes.
As well.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm playing it from the keyboard because that's sort of more.
These obviously aren't velocity sensitive. So
no, they're not velocity sensitive, but it will respond to velocity if you're playing from here. But again, equally, you can play from the keyboards.
Gotcha.
Built onto the front panel there. And same goes for our Juno model on here. So again, you can choose bring in your different waveforms. So you can go bringing in the square or pulse wave and the saw, and bring in a sub. And we do have the Juno chorus available as an effect as well.
Yeah.
So which is cool.
Any classic Juno sounds you can share as we're looking at the Juno?
Let's go down here. You can hear the hiss come on there, which you can control. How much of that hiss?
Good old-fashioned.
If you want to take that out there, yeah. So let's go for Juno strings.
Can I fiddle with the filter?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So is the filter modelled or is that analog?
No, so it's all digital modelling, but again, it's not based on any of our sort of legacy products. This is the SH-4D filter. So it's a new filter design, 24 decibel ladder style filter.
Right. Okay.
So a little bit different. So again, it's if particularly with the Juno and the SH-101, if you're looking for a full sort of recreation of one of those synths, We have products like
You've
the
got that,
Boutique
yeah.
series.
And is this part of the whole cloud ecosystem, or is it its own thing?
No, because it is its own thing. So it's, as I say, it's not part of the sort of Zencore ecosystem. So sadly, it's not possible to exchange patches with other Zencore instruments.
But you can get the patches out of here and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. If you can back up all your patches to a computer, reload them in if you want to work on different sets as well. We got up to the Juno 106 there, but then we also have a cross FM oscillator model, which allows you to blend 2 different waveforms, and you have envelope controls on here. I can change different waveforms, change the different ratios between those as well, and combine different waves.
Oh, it's interesting. A little bit of a tearing edge on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also have a ring modulator oscillator model as well. Yeah, cross FM model where we can change between different parameters.
So you get some really interesting atonal stuff as well. It's not,
Wavetable, you have 31 wave tables to begin with, which you can scan through. And modulate them with the LFO.
Right.
We have a chord oscillator on here, which allows you to choose sort of a sine, triangle, a saw, or a square as your fundamental tone. You can play from individuals, choose different types of chords. So if I choose, say, let's find something like a minor 7th or something, which is always good for, there we go. And you can change the voicing.
Manchester Massive.
Exactly, yeah. And if you wanted to, in the sequencer,
you can modulate.
Modulate for different chord sequences.
Nice, okay.
And then we have, for sort of completely futuristic tones, a drawing oscillator. So this allows you to create your own custom waveform. So you start with a very basic tone, and then manipulating the sliders. And I can use the timbre dial to sort of go between.
Change the slope.
I can grab the dials on here.
Okay.
And if you really wanted to, actually, you can press enter, which kind of starts a recording mode, and I can sort of tweak and create my own custom oscillator in real time,
Right. So I guess that's sort of creating a kind of almost a wavetable, isn't it? Because you've got all those steps of. Okay, interesting.
But you can smooth it out again using sort of the timbre dial there. So it's just, if you've got a very specific kind of sound in mind, you can really mangle it and find some interesting tones. And then the last oscillator model is a PCM one. So we have 53 different PCM samples, which cover things like JD800 piano through Wurlitzers, Kalimbas, Glockenspiels, and again you can layer 4 of these individual tones together as well.
Right, so you've got a sort of JD8 ish kind of engine as well. Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then the great thing is that you can combine all of these tones in sort of into the different parts. So you can have a different oscillator model for each part. Part 1 might be using the SH-4D. Part 2 you might have a 101. You might have a ring modulator, the PCM.
But presumably you can stack those and create like a 4-part.
Yeah.
Or a 4-layer layered instrument as well.
If you wanted to, so they default to being MIDI channels 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 10 for the rhythm part. But if you want in the master section, you can change them to trigger on all MIDI channels.
And can you create splits and layers with that as well? Can you set them?
Not from this, but it will respond to incoming MIDI from different instruments that have got splits.
So if you need a master keyboard to okay.
But if say someone's got say one of our Phantom keyboards where you have multiple different layers and you can set them to be external, you could trigger different sections of that and blend it with your tones.
Now let's have a listen to some sounds.
Yeah. So let me cycle through some sounds on here. Let's go.
Using a couple of oscillators by the looks of things.
So yeah, this is using a super saw and also a pulse width wave. But again, any of the sounds, if I wanted to bring in a different waveform, I can just bring it in from the front panel and just layer that in.
And how quick do you get to the kind of nuts and bolts? Say you want to change some aspects of that particular wave, whatever they may be.
So some of it is hardwired to the front panel, so things like the shape modulation and the coarse pitch on there.
Right.
But if you just press enter, you can go to a bit more.
Right,
you can do fine tune. You can do sort of super saw detune on there. You can even sync some of the oscillators. And we also have this fat control, which is like a it's almost like a sub oscillator within one particular waveform, which is pretty cool. Some other cool sounds. So we have this thing, the recently bass, which is quite cool.
Not lately and not but recently.
Yeah. Recently, yeah, exactly, which is cool. And then we had a look at the sync oscillator, sync oscillator model. I should say as well, actually, within there's hundreds within just the SH-4D oscillator model. There's a couple of hundred presets in there, but we also categorize them by sort of different categories. So you can go through string pads, you can go through poly keys, whatever you want to go through. So poly key, this one, brilliant.
I was going to get you to go into the sequencer, but actually we haven't looked at the rhythm part yet either. Is that the same deal? Because I know on the 707 and the 101, you can actually edit each individual drum voice within the kit.
You can do, yeah. So actually the drum part's got quite an interesting thing. So that our first preset kit on it actually is a completely synthesized drum kit. So this is an example using the synthesized drum kit. So all of these sounds that have been triggered there are just all synthesized parameters. So underneath where we use the sort of built-in keyboard, we can trigger each of the individual sounds. And each one of these, so for instance, our kick drum here, this is just based from a cosine wave, but we can change it. We have sine wave, or then you can go through any number of sort of sampled waveforms that are built into it. But each one of them can go through its own filter and own envelope as well, or its own pitch envelope as well. So
this reminds me a little bit of sort of back in the day. I started with the D110, and that had multiple parts and a rhythm part, and you were able to edit individual sounds. Obviously now you've got a lot more complexity here. So and how many voices are there in a kit?
So the whole keyboard is filled up on here. So you have 2 and a little bit 2 octaves plus an extra 2 notes, really.
24, 26?
Yeah.
Right,
so,
okay.
Which is quite cool. Each of the tones, as well as sort of using a synthesized waveform, we have a whole bunch of sampled waveforms. And
you've
you can
got
actually,
the kind of Roland classics in there as well.
Yeah,
presumably.
and you can actually layer 2 together. So you can have, so if I go down to number 2 on here, which is set to off, I can sort of layer, say, a 909 kick with whatever it was that I'd had on the front on here. So with a sine wave, just to give you an extra bit of bottom end, and blend the balance between those two sounds as well.
So I guess that takes us on to the sequencer. Sequencer is an integral part of this. I mean, would you call it a groove box? I mean, it doesn't sample, so I suppose...
No, not really. I suppose it. We have a dedicated line of groove boxes like the MC707 and the MC101. The sequencer on the SH-4D, because fundamentally it is a desktop synthesizer, but the sequencer is a really great sketch pad for getting things down. You can write up to 64 steps per part, and it's nice and intuitive. So if you're working something on something in the moment and you want to get your ideas down, you can do. So I can show you how to do that. Okay, so I've just selected a few sounds in advance. We have sort of 4 different parts and also a rhythm tone. So we'll start by building the drum kit. So if I select my rhythm tone. Now this is my 16-step sequencer on here, and you can record in real time, or you can use it as a TRX style recorder. So if I just put something in here for my kick drum and my snare, and then I can choose, say, my hi-hats. Put in some claps. So I have a basic rhythm. Then if I go shift and go over to part 1 on here, so I have this key sound. So if I want to do real-time recording, I hit shift and start. Gives us this little graphic. And I can obviously make adjustments to the sound. So it's wavy kind of thing.
Does it record? Can you record parameters?
Yeah. So you can record up to, on a particular sound, up to 4 parameters.
Right,
so whilst it's going, if I wanted to... So that's recorded in there now. And I can go over to my next part. And I can make this 32 steps. So if I do shift and pattern, let's go to 32.
So each part can have a separate step length.
Yeah, so for my first part I've got 16, this one let's do 32.
Can you change the resolution as well? So you could use 32 at quarter notes and have a really long chord sequence, for instance, just on the notes,
if you wanted to, or you could, if you wanted something a bit longer and you're working with, you could put it in eighth notes and then that would kind of effectively give you 8 bars. So I now find my, let's say, bass sound, and let's do 64 steps on this one.
You can adjust the level of these things. The bass sounds quite to me.
In the pattern on here, when we press pattern, now our sliders become a mixer. You can see them on here. I can bring things down, and actually the timbre becomes our drums on there. So we can adjust them on the fly. You can even you can go in and you can mute out different elements as you want them as well, or mute out individual drum parts. So just take out the kick.
Right.
And then one other thing I was going to add, just to show another cool little feature. So we go to our fourth sound on here, where I've got this sound. So, I mean, we have a standard arpeggiator built into it as well, but we also have a very cool thing called the visual arpeggiator. So if I go into the menu on here, I choose our visual arpeggiator. If I go to, say, one of these, which is, say, the bubble one, play in some notes. Every time it hits the screen, it sort of triggers a note, but I can choose the speed, I can change the amount of gravity of these. But again, I can apply things like if you're it's quite into sort of ambient textures. And then when we play our track.
Okay, interesting. Can you use that to drive modulations as well as notes?
Yes, actually, sorry, yeah, depending on which one that you're using. So if I go to, say, this one, the orbit on here, let's hold a long note and bring in this one. So that's modulating that first part, and I can bring in I can sort of change the width of the orbit, bring in the second one.
Oh, interesting.
So it's going around a wider thing. But there's also some fun stuff, so we've got one for this sound, we've got Pong in here, so if I choose this note.
So you can play and arpeggiate at the same time?
Yeah, and then it gives you a score for how you're getting on, so you get 1-0 on there.
Just the perfect thing if you've got full-on ADHD, right? Yeah.
But some fun stuff, so, and again with the sequencer, for each individual note that you're playing in, you can do, you can change like the gate length, you can manually adjust velocity, but you can also do parameter automation, and you can even put in probability of triggering notes.
So,
as
I mean,
well,
in terms of, you could pair this with a groove box and have those extra voices, that extra synthesis, and extra hands-on control.
Yeah, completely.
Right?
I mean, as I say, this is great for just getting the ideas down, having a play. But if you do have a groove box and you want to, everything is sort of CC controlled, which might you can send.
And that transmits as well, does it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could pair this with something like an MC707 and use that to drive.
One just here, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. So, I mean, I guess this begs the question. I mean, we've got, this is obviously built to a price range. I mean, what sort of price is this going to be?
So, in euros, this is going to be 629 euros, which is our recommended retail price, which is probably roughly maybe about £549 in pounds, or something like that.
So these are available now?
Yeah, these are going to be available from March.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming down here and showing us the SH-4D. For those of you who are interested, we also got a little bit of extra in-depth on our Patreon, so do check that out if you're interested. But for now, I think, Andy, you're going to play us out with a bit more noodling on the SH-4D, available now.